All right, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. All right, so this week's portion is Mishpatim, which means judgments. Okay? It's going to cover Exodus 21 all the way to 24:18. I hope you read it, right? Yes, for sure. Okay, so in this portion, it covers a lot. Like there's a lot of random different laws in this portion. So it seems like it's kind of scattered everywhere, but there's a reason why it's written like that, which I'll explain later. But my focus for this teaching is going to be mostly on comparing, contrasting with ancient Near Eastern laws, how, the Torah writes its laws differently than how it was done in the ancient Near East. And when you study from the ancient Near Eastern perspective, a lot of the laws in the Torah make sense. And then we're going to talk about apodictic, apodictic versus casuistic laws, what that means. And then I'm going to cover Hebrews 9 and Exodus 24 and see how those connect with each other. It's going to be very interesting. And if we have spare time, Matthew 22, we'll see how far we go. Okay? But before we do anything, I'm going to do the blessing. Baruch et Adonai HaMbarak, Baruch Adonai HaMbarak Le'olam Bayed, Baruch et Adonai Elohim Le'olam, Asher B'Chabanu Mikol V'Natan Lanu Torato, Baruch et Adonai Noten HaTorah. All right. So, to get it started, we're going to talk about slavery laws. Yay. It's very awkward for a lot of people, especially for believers. When we try to tell people that, we believe in God, and we try to teach them about, the Gospels and stuff like that, they're always going to bring the slavery laws, which is kind of awkward for us, right? I'm not going to lie. Like, it's kind of hard explaining the Bible, and they're like, hey, don't you have these laws that promote slavery in the Bible? So when you look at it from a modern point of view, it looks bad, but you have to look at it from their perspective, okay? So like I said, you'll share the Bible, and somebody's going to be yelling at you all these verses about, God promotes slavery, that's wrong, that's corrupt. But like I said, you're looking at it from a modern point of view. That's the issue, okay? You have to think like an ancient Near Eastern person, okay? So let's start off with the portion. If somebody could read this for me, please, with a loud voice. Yes, you.
When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, and in 7 he shall go out free. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out with her. But if the slave plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free, then his master shall bring him to God, and he shall bring him to the door or to the doorpost, and his master shall bore his ear through with an owl.
Owl. Not an owl. An owl.
Something like that. And he shall be a slave forever.
So people read that and they're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. God, how could he be like that? If he's so just, how can he promote slavery? But like I said, everybody is looking at it from a modern point of view. And us specifically in America, I'm pretty sure you guys all took history class, so we learned about slavery in the South, right? And it was pretty brutal, okay? It's bad. But it's very different than slavery in the ancient Near East. Slavery in the South was based on race. In the ancient Near East, it wasn't about what color you were. In the South, it was. If you were black, you're going to be a slave. You have no rights. You had to be white to have certain rights. It wasn't like that in the ancient Near East. They didn't really care what color you were because, one, there was no white people there. They're like, whatever. But they didn't really care about that. It was more about class. What class or status are you? Are you on the top? Are you on the bottom? If you're on the bottom, you're a poo-poo. If you're on the top, now we can talk. But it was more about your status. They didn't really care about what you look like. Also, it was perpetual by birth. So once you were born a slave, you're always going to be a slave. Okay, so your kids are going to be slaves, and then their kids are going to be slaves until they run away and they make it to the north. So slavery is perpetual in the South. Okay, and it kind of is in the ancient Near East, but it's also temporary depending on the type of slavery. And they were treated as property, non-human, and that was kind of the excuse that they gave of why they treated their slaves so bad. They're like, well, it's my property. I can do with my property however I like. So they were treated them like couches, I could do whatever I want with these people because they're just my objects. Okay, they were not treated like human beings, which is kind of in the ancient Near East, but when it comes to the Torah, there's a huge difference, which we'll talk about. And then it was also to labor to maximize profit. So everything was about making money in the South. In the ancient Near East is different. Okay, they didn't have capitalism. Okay. Everything was a household economy, which means that everybody in the house is really worried about sustaining themselves. They're not trying to make money or make profit. It's about maintaining themselves. Yes, the Egyptians, they used slavery to build monuments and stuff like that. But we're talking on like on a smaller scale. Everybody that had slaves, it was mostly for labor, so that way they can collect crops and they could survive. Okay? It wasn't about making profit. And like I said, you got to look at things from an ancient Near Eastern perspective. Okay, it was based on poverty, debt, or war. So if you're really poor and you were desperate, you would give yourself into slavery. It's free food in return of labor, basically like a job. We're slaves. It's true. Then there's debt slaves. Okay, a debt slave basically, if I owe somebody a debt, okay, I owe you $1,000, and I can't pay you back. I'm like, hey, I can cut your grass for 50 years, I guess, and we'll pay it off that way. So that's what they would do. Or war. If we're in battle and they get me and they don't kill me, now they have me as a slave, which, if you think about it, is better than dying. So, I mean, it's not too great, but that was one option, okay? And it was often temporary, depending on the type of slavery. Like I said, for a debt slave, if I had to pay back a debt, I'm going to work for a certain amount of years, and then that debt is cleared. But other cases, it would be permanent, depending. And then they were integrated into the household economy. And what that means for the little people is, like I said, the household, everybody in the house was worried about themselves. Okay, they wanted to maintain themselves, they wanted to survive. And now the slave, even though he's my slave and he's working by force, he still has to survive too. So we're all working together to maintain ourselves. Okay, that was the mindset for them. Even though, like I said, there's different classes, in a way, the slave is kind of like the butler of a house, but like treated poorly. Okay, but there's going to be a huge difference between the Torah and the ancient Near East, and that's what we're going to talk about later. Okay, but I'm going to go back to this portion that we're reading, and it says, if the master gives him a wife. Okay, now usually in the ancient Near East, if somebody is giving a wife, it was to make like a pact. Okay, so for example, like adoption, if I'm going to adopt Oved, okay, I'm like, Oved, you need money, and I need somebody to take care of me. I'm going to adopt you, and I'm going to formalize, formalize? What's the word? No. To make it official, okay? To make it official, I'm going to find you a wife, and that wife is going to be symbolic of that pact between me and you, okay? So that's one thing they would do. They would find somebody a wife to symbolize that pact, and that pact meant that it was eternal. So that's what he's doing here. Because again, this is a person that owes a debt, okay? He owes a debt, he can't pay it off, so he's going to work it off. So this guy doesn't have a lot of money, okay? So if he leaves, he's not going to McDonald's. There's no McDonald's back then, so he's going to be, he's going to be in need. So either he goes out poor and desperate, or he has this opportunity to stay with the guy. So the guy is basically offering him a permanent job. It's like, look, you need a roof over your head, you need food, and you know what? I need somebody working for me. So why don't we make this a permanent thing? Because I know when you go outside, you don't really have anything. So why don't we just have this agreement between each other? Okay, I'm going to give you a wife. You're going to have kids. You'll be with me. You'll be part of my household. You'll just work for me, and then in return, I'll take care of you. So that's the relationship that's going on here. It's not an oppressive one. He's making a deal with somebody that's poor, okay? Like I said, it's basically like a job, okay? We are slaves in a way, right? But now let's talk about the ancient Near East versus the Torah, okay? This is where, when you look at it from that perspective, you start to see how the Torah is more just than in the ancient Near East, okay? And to really understand that, we're going to look at the Code of Hammurabi, okay? So when you go to the Code of Hammurabi, it says in Code 16, if anyone receive into his house a runaway male or female slave of the court or of a freedman, and does not bring it out at the public proclamation of the major domus, the master of the house shall be put to death, okay? What is the Code of Hammurabi? It's like, it was for Babylon? Yeah, it was the laws for Babylon. Like how we have a constitution, or every other country has their own laws. This is the laws for Babylon, basically.
So it gives us an insight to
how they thought
back then.
If you want to write that down, yes. And then it says, if he hold the slaves in his house and they're caught there, he shall be put to death. So basically, to put it in nice, simple terms, if you help a slave that's running away, you get put to death. If they find you hiding the slave, you get put to death, okay? You can't have runaway slaves. You got to bring it back to the master, okay? So keep that in mind. And now we go to the Torah. And it says in Deuteronomy 23, 15 to 16, It says, and you shall not hand over a slave to his master who has escaped and fled to you from his master. He shall reside with you in your midst in the place that he chooses in one of your towns, wherever he pleases. You shall not oppress him. So we see here there's a very big distinction between how slaves are treated in the ancient Near East and how slaves are treated in the Torah. In the ancient Near East, they're seen as property, but God reminds everybody, like, no, that's still a person, okay? He's not an animal. You got to treat him with respect, okay? If he doesn't want to stay with you, he wants to leave, let him leave, okay? Or we'll see later on, I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but we'll see other laws. For example, like I said, remember in the ancient Near East, everything is based on class, okay? So if you're in a higher class, you get better treatment. If you're on a lower class, your life really blows, okay? There's not that much sunshine there. So in Code 196, it says, a Welam, I think that's how you say it, free upper class man. See, I put a little notation there. If an Awilam put out the eye of another Awilam, his eye shall be put out, an eye for an eye. If he break the bone of another Awilam's bone, his bone shall be broken. So if a rich guy gets into a fight with another guy and he makes him blind to one eye, now they have to blind his eye to make it fair. Okay, if it's another rich guy. If he put out the eye of a freedman, a regular dude, okay, that's not really rich, or break the bone of a freedman, he shall pay 1 gold mina. Okay, so if he gets into a fight with a regular guy and, I don't know, he chomps off his hand, nothing's going to happen to him because of his status. So all he has to do is pay him. And remember, he's rich, so that's probably nothing to him. Okay, it's like me slapping somebody and then throwing $20 at the guy and have a lunch. That's basically what's going on. So it's not really fair. And then it says, if he put out the eye of a man's slave or break the bone of a man's slave, he shall pay 1/2 of its value. Okay, it doesn't even describe the slave as a person. It's like talking about an animal. Okay, so if a rich guy, let's say he's driving his car and then boom, 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 speed bump, he hits a slave. He's like, oh man, I'm so sorry. He pays half of his value to the owner. Okay, so they don't even have the slave as a human in their laws. Okay, which is crazy. And they don't even get the money. They don't even get any of that money that goes to the owner. Doesn't that suck? Hey, doesn't it suck? But again, when you go to the Torah, Exodus 21, 26 to 27, it says, when a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, okay, and he destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. So again, there's a giant difference between how slaves are treated in the Torah and in the ancient Near East. God is trying to teach people that it's not about what class you are, okay? It doesn't matter how rich you are. Even if you're at the bottom of the ladder in society, you're still a human being. You still deserve human rights, okay? Which was something crazy in the ancient Near East because everybody didn't really care about the slave. A slave is just my property, okay? My slave is basically like my donkey. So why do I have to worry about his rights? He's just there to make me happy. But the Torah is saying, look, he's still a human being. You still got to take care of him. And he tells the Israelites, remember, you guys were slaves, and I saved you. So don't forget about that. So don't mistreat them, because you were in their position at one point. And then we have the Sabbath laws. It says, 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. So everybody has an opportunity to enjoy this rest. And in the ancient Near East, there was no day offs. Okay, it varied. I think in Egypt they had, I think it was one every 3 weeks I saw, something like that. But it was only for rich people. So only rich people got days off. And in the rest of the nations, it was every once in a while. Okay, so they didn't really have a consistent day off. So imagine working 120 hours straight, and the only rest you got was in your dreams. Okay, it's very depressing. So then in Israel, it's different. It's like, hey, this Saturday, you don't have to work. You actually get to rest. That would have been crazy. They're like, what are you talking about? You don't want me to work? Like, no, you're not allowed to work. God says you're not allowed to. Okay, God is giving you a day off. So just relax, sit back, enjoy some rest. You don't have to stress out about it. But everywhere else in the ancient Near East, it was consistent work, nonstop. Like I said, the only break that you got was in your dreams. Okay, it's depressing. And this is the prologue from the Code of Hammurabi. The prologue is basically like the introduction and the beginning of a book, letter, page, if you don't know what that was. But he says, okay, this is Hammurabi, the king, talking. He says, Anu and Bel, which are their gods, called by name me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, who feared God to bring about the rule of righteousness, in the land to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong should not harm the weak, so that I should rule over the black-headed people like Shamash, and enlighten the land to further the well-being of mankind. So that sounds very beautiful, but he was not really doing that, okay? And that's the whole point of God, of what he's doing with Israel. He's trying to show everybody, not just Israel, everybody what is true justice. Because like I said, in the ancient Near East, they had their own form of justice, okay? Justice was whatever they thought was right, okay? As long as I treat my people okay, everyone else, they can figure it out. Everything was based on a caste system, okay? So if you're on the bottom of the pyramid, I'm sorry, it's just bad luck. You got born into the wrong situation. But I'm on the top of the ladder, so I don't really have to worry about you. But God is trying to teach everybody that it doesn't matter where you're born into society. There is going to be different classes. There's going to be different statuses, but it doesn't give you the right to take somebody's rights away or to treat them as an animal. Everybody's the same in God's eyes. Everybody has the same opportunity to come to him, to his tabernacle, to enjoy his feast. So you can't deny anybody just because of their status. There's always going to be poor people because some people, they get into harsh times. They don't know how to manage their money, whatever it is. But it doesn't give you a right to oppress somebody. Because at one point, like God said, you were slaves. So you can't oppress other people of lower class just because, now you have the power. You have to treat everybody fairly. And that is the difference between the ancient Near East and the Torah, okay? And I can go into a whole bunch of other laws, but we're not going to do that because that's not my main focus. And then we have apodictic versus casuistic laws, okay? Now, apodictic, which is a hard word for me to say, basically, they're direct commands. Though shall not formula. Okay, that's the formula that they follow. So, for example, if I say, hey, in this class, don't talk, it's pretty straightforward, right? There are no conditions, no stipulations. You're not like, maybe he's talking to somebody else. Or maybe he doesn't mean next class when Lucas teaches. Maybe he's just talking about this class, and maybe he'll be okay next week or whatever. No, it's pretty straightforward. It's for everyone, and it's at any time. So when I say, hey, don't talk in this class, it goes for every single class, even the ones where I'm not teaching, okay? But it's rare in the... I'm sorry.
Feel free to talk in my class.
I was going to say.
Love you, buddy.
So apodictic is actually very rare in the ancient Near East. You don't see a lot of laws like that, but it's very common in the Torah. Can somebody guess... where do we see these laws that says you can and cannot do stuff? Can you guys guess? Where does it say that thou shall or shall not? The Ten Commandments? Yes, that's correct, okay? That's the Ten Commandments. So they're straightforward. They're not like, well, maybe God didn't really mean that. It's direct. So when God says, the fourth commandment, you shall keep the Sabbath, he's talking to everybody, and it applies to everyone, and it's not like, maybe he didn't really mean the Sabbath, or maybe he didn't really mean that, because I see that online. People try to, do these word games around it. It's like, no, he said, you shall keep the Sabbath. And it goes for, I just read where it says it's for everybody. Even the animals have to enjoy the Sabbath. So how can you say that you don't want to enjoy the Sabbath? It's a gift for you. And then we have casuistic, okay? These are more sophisticated. They're a case-by-case law. And what that means in simpler terms is, just like today, in court, okay, I'm riding my car and then I speed bump, I hit somebody. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now I got to go to court. And the judge is going to see my case. But then after my case, there's a different court case. Okay, Lucas fender bender hit somebody because he was really getting into that Hillsong music, okay? And he was closing his eyes and he hit the guy in the back. So case by case means that everybody looks at different cases and you try to apply the laws in different scenarios. Okay, it's not always going to be straightforward. Okay, you got to kind of see how things go. So they're usually going to follow an if and then clause. So if this happens, then you do this. Okay, but they're not meant to be taken literally. Okay, and what I mean by that is that, for example, in the Torah it says if you're chopping wood and you have the axe, and then you go like this, and the head of the axe flings back, and it hits the guy on the head. He dies. It starts giving you a list of things of what you're supposed to do. But it doesn't mean that that exact scenario has to happen. So if I'm driving my car and I accidentally kill somebody, it doesn't mean that, oh, well, the law doesn't apply to me because it's only about an axe. Obviously, that's not how it works. It's giving you a scenario where somebody commits manslaughter, and then what are they supposed to do? So that's how case-by-case laws work. The judge, he would look at my case, he would look at the Torah, he would see where the case is kind of similar in the laws, and then you would try to make a determination. So it's like a case study, basically. So it's analyzed for a specific case, okay? And it's very much like our laws today. Our laws kind of follow that same formula, okay? So that's apodictic versus casuistic. A lot of the laws in this Torah portion are going to be casuistic, okay? So they're not meant to be taken literally, like this exact scenario has to happen, but they're examples of what you're supposed to do if something similar happens like that. And that's why we have so many random different laws, because they're basically the Torah civil laws, okay? How you're supposed to treat people, what you're supposed to do in this scenario, how to be righteous, how to be just, how to keep the Sabbath, how to keep the feast days, how many times he expects you to come to the temple. Those are all things that he talks about in this Torah portion, okay? But once he gives Israel all the laws, then they formally make an agreement, okay? And that's where Exodus 24 comes into hand. And in Hebrews 9, we see that there's a quote where he quotes from Exodus 24, okay? But before we get into the book of Hebrews, we really have to ask certain questions about the book itself, okay? For example, who is the book of Hebrews written to? That's a tough one. Yes, exactly. The book of Hebrews is written to the Hebrews. And why is that important? Because it's not written to the Gentiles. It's written to the Hebrews. So if it's written to the Hebrews, the person expects you to know the Torah, correct? So if you don't know the Torah, you're going to read the book of Hebrews, well, you're wasting your time, okay? It's like if I wrote a letter to Lucas and I have inside jokes, and then you grab it from me and start reading it, and you're like, this is not funny. I don't get it. It's like, well, it was for Lucas, and, maybe if I explain myself, it'll be a little bit funnier. But yeah, so if you're reading the book of Hebrews, you're expected to know about the Torah, specifically about the temple. So when was the book of Hebrews written? Does anybody know that? I'll let you answer if nobody answers, which I think is yes.
Right at the time of the temple destruction, around 67 AD.
Yes, around 70 AD, yes.
7?
No. So it's between 60 to 70 AD. During that time, they're having Jewish revolts against the Romans. And I think in 67 AD, they took over Galilee. So there's already like this ominous loom of feeling that things are about to go bad. So that's why this book was written around that time, as a way to comfort the people, because soon, in 70 AD, the temple's going to be destroyed. And that's going to be a big deal once we see later on the line when I explain it. So it's written around that time, 60 to 70 AD. What day of the year does it focus on? Not you guys. Maybe you, I don't know. What day of the year does it focus on? Do you know? What's the most important day of the year out of our whole Hebrew calendar? Yom Kippur, yes, that is correct. Yom Kippur is the most important day of the year, and that's what the book of Hebrews is always talking about. So, Yom Kippur, which is Day of Atonement, if you're going to read the book of Hebrews, you have to understand the Day of Atonement. If you don't understand the Day of Atonement, you're not going to understand the book of Hebrews. So you have to know about the Torah, you have to know about the Day of Atonement, you have to know about the services in the Day of Atonement, how everything was done, what animals were used, what was it for. If you don't know any of those things, how are you going to read the book of Hebrews? What's the point? It's like reading the Gospels and not knowing any of the Old Testament stuff. What service of Yom Kippur does it focus on? There's a bunch of services. What service in particular does it focus on? Which one is the most important part of Yom Kippur? What was like the craziest part where only one time a year the priest would do something? Yes.
Is it the scapegoat?
No. It's something more specific. Like I said, there's only one time in the year where he goes to this area. Yes, the Holy of Holies. Okay, so it's talking about when the priest goes into the Holies of Holies and he sprinkles the blood on the mercy seat. But why does he do that? If you don't understand why he does that, then again, you're not going to understand the book of Hebrews. Okay, so you have to know all this information before you even read the book of Hebrews. Otherwise, like I said, there's no point for you to read it. It's going to be confusing. Okay? So if we go to Hebrews 9, 19 to 22, it talks about the blood of the covenant. Can somebody read this for me so I can save my voice? Thank you.
Therefore, not even the first covenant was ratified without blood. For when every commandment has been spoken by Moses to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of the calves with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the scroll itself and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that God has commanded for you." And likewise, he sprinkled both the tabernacle and all the utensils of of service with the blood. Indeed, nearly everything is purified with blood according to the law, and apart from the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness.
That was fantastic. Thank you. Now, he is quoting from Exodus 24, 3-8. Lucas, could you please read this for me? Speak as softly as possible.
Stop!
Moses told the people all the words of the Lord, and all the people answered with one voice. All the words that the Lord has spoken, we will do. And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young men who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half the blood and threw it against the altar. Then he read the book of the covenant to the people, and they said, all that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient. And Moses took the other half of the blood and threw it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words.
Okay, so now you have to ask, why is the author of the book of Hebrews quoting this for chapter 9? Why did they do this ceremony? What's the purpose of this? Okay, so he took half the blood from the bulls, sprinkled it on the altar, sprinkled on the people, and then sprinkled on the altar. After they said the verbal affirmation that they're going to do what God told them to do, the Torah. Okay, so there's a quote from Zondervan Illustrated Bible Background Commentary by John Walton, and it says, while the purpose of the sprinkling is not entirely clear, we can infer some aspects of its significance. The blood may have created a connection between the people and the sacrificed animals. In a sense, the people are now part of what has been offered to Hashem. The blood also seems to make binding the people's commitment to abide by the obligations that agreement places on them. Their submitting to the sprinkling may be compared to signing a contract today. So that's basically what was going on. When they did Exodus 24 and they said, yes, we're going to do what God says, and they do the blood on the people and on the altar, it was like signing a contract, okay? I don't know, you guys are too young, so you guys don't really sign contracts. But when your mom and dad gets a car and they go to the dealership and they're like, yes, we'll agree to pay the car for this amount of money, they're telling the bank, like, we're going to make sure to pay on time, we're going to pay this amount. If we don't do that, then you can take my car, okay? So you're agreeing to fulfill the agreements, and if I fail to do that, then this is the punishment that happens. And that's what they were doing at Mount Sinai. God told them everything that they're supposed to do. If they don't do that, then the curses are going to happen. And they agreed to that. And then the golden calf stuff happens not too long afterwards. But what Rico talks about is what happened here was indexing. Okay, so they made a connection between the temple, between the tabernacle, and between the people. Okay, so there's connection between the altar and the people. So now whatever the people do affects the altar. Okay, so they're responsible for maintaining that space. So if you want God's presence to stay in that tabernacle, in that temple, it depends on your behavior. Okay, if you want God to be in the midst of you, it depends on how you behave. Okay, so if you're on your best behavior, God is going to be with you. If not, eventually he's going to leave. Okay, and we see this in Leviticus 16, 15-16. Okay, somebody can read this for me. Ben, oh my gosh, right on time. What? Oh my God, they heard that on camera. You want to read? Oh, it's okay. Obed, you read.
And he shall slaughter the sin offering goat, which is for the people, and he shall bring its blood from behind the curtain, and he shall do it with its blood, as that which he did with the bull's blood, and he shall spatter it on the atonement cover and before the atonement cover. Thus he shall make atonement for the sanctuary from the Israelites, impurities and from their transgressions, for all their sins, and so he must do for the tent of assembly, which dwells with them in the midst of your impurities.
So what Obed just read is that the purpose of Yom Kippur, the purpose of all these offerings, is to clean the tabernacles of Israel's impurities, of their sins. So it's the sins that defile the temple, and the purpose of Yom Kippur is to clean that up. Yom Kippur is Day of Atonement. If you don't know what that is, I think I said that earlier. No? Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if you like pictures, I have pictures for you guys to illustrate that. We have the tabernacle, and then this is our sins. Okay, think of it like ooey gooey germs. Okay, it's dirtying the temple. Something has to be done. It has to be clean because God does not like a dirty temple. Okay, He wants things to be nice and shiny, sparkling clean. If nobody cleans it, eventually He's gonna go. He's gonna leave. Okay, because He can't be where sin is, because sin is a form of death. God is life, the source of life. Okay, they cannot be together. Either one is gone or one's leaving. Okay, so that's why we have Yom Kippur. Okay, it's a nice little sponge. It cleans up all the little itty bitty sins and stuff like that. So that way God's presence can stay in the tabernacle among the people. That is the function of Yom Kippur, to maintain God's presence in the tabernacle, to clean it from impurities, to clean the impurities that represent death. Okay, so keep that image in your brain, take screenshots in your brain, and keep that image with you. Okay, so like I said, Yom Kippur is to make sure that everything is okie dokie with God and the people. Okay, but there's one thing that the Torah, that Yom Kippur doesn't do. Yom Kippur doesn't fix the root of the problem. If you have one Yom Kippur 1 year, what's going to happen next year? Am I going to need another Yom Kippur? Why? People sin. Well, I thought this, didn't it fix it? Didn't it clean everything up? No, right? So I'm still going to sin every year. Why is that? Why do we sin in the first place? Adam, is his fault, right? He sinned, and now we have that taste for sin, like, yummy. But we have that issue. We have that, like Paul talks about. He says, what I want to do, I don't do, and what I don't want to do, I do. Okay? Which sounds like very confusing, but basically he's saying our flesh, it takes control sometimes. So we still have that issue. So the Torah, Yom Kippur, it doesn't fix that. So we still need that solution to be dealt with. Okay? It's kind of like a tourniquet. It was really hard to find a normal picture. I found a lot of like gruesome pictures. Oh my gosh. It was awful. I wanted a leg one, but all I got were the other ones. But anyway, so it's like a tourniquet. Okay, let's say I got shot or I cut my leg and I'm bleeding out, okay? And then they give me a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. Do I just go home? They're like, oh, okay, you're all fine now. You can just go home, walk it off. Is that fine? No, okay? It's a temporary solution. They still need to take me to the hospital to get me surgery to fix my leg, right? It's the same thing with the Torah. Right now, we are in a state of sin where we still want to sin. And the Torah offers a temporary solution, so that way we can still dwell with God. Let me explain it a different way, okay? Because I'm going to confuse myself. Because there's a book, and it says, Who Shall Ascend the Mountain of the Lord? It's a very good book by Michael Morales. And he explains that God's original plan is the Garden of Eden, okay? He wanted to dwell with humanity in the garden. That was his original plan, okay? So if you want to write it down in your notes, that's what I would write down. God's desire is to dwell with us despite our condition, okay? So even though we sinned and things didn't really work out in the garden, God still wants to be with us. That's his desire. That's what he wants, okay? Which is crazy because in the ancient Near East, God didn't want anything to do with humanity, okay? They were like, oh, whatever, okay? They can bother me all day. I have other things to do, like sleep. But God actually wanted to hang out with his people. He wanted to be amongst them in their midst. That's why he says in Exodus 25:8, the tabernacle was actually built so that God could dwell with his people. He says, build me a mishkan so I can dwell among my people. Okay, that's the function of the tabernacle. When people say, oh, we don't want the tabernacle, we don't want the temple, that's done away with. What they're saying is, we don't want God in our midst, because that's the function of the tabernacle. It's the function of the temple. For God to physically be among you, okay? Which is very different than having God in my heart. It's like, having a visitation from your dad once a week rather than see him every day. What would you rather have? Okay, let's be honest. And then the offerings and the rituals are what's needed to maintain that space, okay? Because like I said, even though God still wants to dwell with us, okay, we still have the issue of sin. And sin scares God, not scares God. Sin drives God away, right? So we need a solution. For the meantime, okay, we have this tabernacle. I'm going to dwell with you, but I need you guys to be on your best behavior, because if you're not on your best behavior, if you sin too much, eventually I got to leave because, I'm holy, I'm set apart, I'm life, okay? So if you want me to be in your midst, I need you to follow these rules. And that's the purpose of the Torah and the tabernacle. It's about maintaining that relationship, maintaining that space. It's not about salvation. It's not about giving you life. It's about maintaining the relationship with God. That's the purpose of the Torah. That's the purpose of the offerings and Yom Kippur, okay? Especially Yom Kippur. So, if God wants to go back to the original plan, he has to fix the root of the problem, okay? How is he going to fix the root of the problem? The Torah doesn't have that solution. Who could it be? Yes, whoa. Paul talks about this in Romans 5:12-15. He says, so then, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all people because all sinned. For before the law was given, sin was in the world, but there is no accounting for sin when there is no law. Yet death reigned from Adam until Moses, even over those who did not sin in the same way. That Adam, who is a type of the coming one, transgressed. And that word transgressed in the Greek is parabasis, which is similar to pesha, which is rebellion. And that's going to be important later on, but just hold on to that, okay? But the gracious gift is not like the transgression. For if the many died through the transgression of one man, how much more did the grace of God and the gift by the grace of the one man, Yeshua Messiah, multiply to the many? Okay, so he's talking about that same problem, okay? Through Adam, we have death all over the world. But through Yeshua, he brings a solution. Well, the question is, how? Okay, so like if you're talking to a Jewish guy, and you're like, well, why do you guys need this Jesus guy? You have to explain that. Why do we need him in the first place? How exactly does he offer that solution? Okay, so before we get there, let's talk about blood. Why do we need blood? Okay, Leviticus 11, it says, indeed, the flesh's life is in the blood, and I have given it to you on the altar to make atonement for your lives, because it is the blood with the life that makes atonement. Now, in the Hebrew, Rico has a teaching about this. The proper translation should be ransom. And ransom is different than atonement. Ransom is given this idea of paying this debt that you owe. Okay, so the animal with the blood pays off this debt that you owe. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, there's a quote from another book. Okay, Leviticus 1-16 by Jacob Pilgrim. He's an expert when it comes to Leviticus. He's a Jewish scholar. He has like 3 volumes, covers the whole book of Leviticus. It's a lot of reading, but it's a lot of good information. So in this book, he says, the blood is the ritual detergent employed by the priest to remove the sanctuary of the impurities inflicted upon it by the offerer. So basically that picture that I had with the sponge and the sins and all that stuff, that's basically what he's talking about. The blood daubed on the altars or spread inside the shrine purges the sanctuary of its accumulated impurities. Now we are in a position to grasp its rationale. Impurity is the realm of death. Only its antonym, life can be its antidote. Blood then, as life, is what purges the sanctuary. It nullifies, overpowers, and absorbs the Israelites' impurities that adhere to the sanctuary, thereby allowing the divine presence to remain in Israel to survive. Okay? So if you didn't understand what that means. Impurities, okay, whether it's intentional sin, whether it's unintentional sin, whether it's whatever that made the impurity, it drives God away, and God is the source of life. If God is driven away, what do you have left? If there's no life, well, there's sin, but what sin leads to what? Yes, sin leads to death. If God, who is life, is gone, now all you have is death, okay? So what he's saying here is that the way to combat death, you got to use life. And that's why they use blood in the offerings to clean the tabernacle from death, using the life in the blood. That's basically what he's saying, okay, in a very simple term, okay? And I know I said a lot, so we're going to time out right here. I'm going to calm my voice a little bit, and we're going to do a little quick recap. So, Exodus 24 is the inauguration of the covenant with blood. You can write that as a note. 17:11, blood has life, thus it purges death / impurities. You can write that as a note. Leviticus 16:15-17. Okay, Yom Kippur uses blood to purge the temple, specifically the inside, where the mercy is, from sins and impurities. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to write that down. if you're writing notes. If you're not writing notes, then take mental notes. That helps a lot. If you have a good memory. If not, please write notes. What I'm going to say. Yes. So, one important thing to understand. This is from Jacob Milgram's book. He has a very nice, pretty little pictures. But he explains how there's different types of sins and how they affect different parts of the tabernacle, of the sanctuary. Okay? So if I sin by mistake, involuntarily, okay, I'm supposed to bring an offering to the altar on the outside, the burning altar. Okay? If we have all the community sins somehow by mistake, then we have to bring an offering to the altar of incense. Now, when it comes to willful sins, okay, where you know it's bad and you do it anyways, or unrepented sins where you're like, oh, whatever, I did it, who cares? That's going to affect the Ark of the Covenant, and that's rebellious sin. So whenever we hear anything about the mercy seat, about the Ark of the Covenant, know that we're talking specifically about rebellious sin. So when you see it in the New Testament where it mentions the Holy of Holies or the mercy seat, it's talking about rebellious sin, and that's going to be very important, okay? Because rebellious sin does not have any offering. Numbers 15:30, it says that there's no offering for willful sin, okay? There's nothing you could do. What happened to David? David, he committed adultery, and he killed that guy, so now he's a murderer, and there was nothing he could do. There was no offering he could give. It says it in Psalms 55? 50? There's a psalm where he says there's nothing I can do, basically. Like, I'm screwed. What can I give? What can I offer? Because he willfully sinned. But God forgave him. But it still came at a price because he said, I'll forgive you, but I'm going to take the life of your son, who was innocent, foreshadowing. Okay? But that's the thing with rebellious sin. When it comes to rebellious sin, there is atonement on Yom Kippur, but it's based on God's discretion. So God is going to see your case by case, right, like we talked about. He's going to see your case. He's going to see, Obed, you did this thing. You hit somebody with a car on purpose, which is kind of crazy. But then you felt really bad. So you know what? I'll let it slide this time. Okay? But the thing about forgiveness in Hebrew, even though God forgives you, it doesn't mean that punishment is not going to happen. You're still going to get it. But I'll forgive you. Okay? And that's going to be very important because what is the sin that Adam did? What type of sin would you classify it as? Rebellious sin, right? He did it on purpose. He knew he wasn't supposed to do it, but he did it anyway, okay? And there's no offering for rebellious sin. God can forgive, but there has to be a payment, a ransom, done for that sin, okay? Who's going to pay that ransom? Foreshadowing, okay? So we have Romans 3:21-25. Please, somebody read this for me so I don't, yes.
But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God, although it is attested by the law and the prophets, has been disclosed. Namely, the righteousness of God through the faithfulness of Yeshua Messiah for all who believe. For there is no distinction, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. But they are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is inside Yeshua. God publicly displayed him at his death as the mercy seat, accessible through faith. This was to demonstrate his righteousness, because God in his forbearance had passed over the sins previously committed. Okay, so like I said, it mentions where's the mercy seat? Where's the mercy seat? Yes. On the ark in the holies of holies, right? So he's talking about the holies of holies. And what sins are associated with the holy of holies, with the mercy seat? Talked about it. Rebellious sins, right? So it's not just any sins that Yeshua is dealing with. He's dealing with rebellious sin. Why? Because there's no offering. Remember Numbers 15:30, there's no offering for rebellious sin. So if somebody's going to pay that price, so all of humanity can be forgiven, that's where Yeshua comes in. He comes in as a ransom. He even describes himself as a ransom in the New Testament. But before we get into Hebrews 9, you got to read the chapter before, okay? So Hebrews 8:10-11, it says, For this is the covenant that I will decree with the house of Israel. After those days, says the Lord, I am putting my laws in their minds, and I will write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And they will not teach each other one his fellow citizen, and each one his brother, saying, Know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. Okay? So the new covenant goal is that the Torah is in our hearts, that we seek fidelity with God over seeking sin. Has that happened yet? Okay, are you guys not sinning anymore? Like you just feel God's presence and stuff like that? Or do you guys still make mistakes? I make mistakes. So yes, we still make mistakes. Just to add, the heart in the ancient Near East was more of the mind.
Yes. So yes, it's more like in your head, your brain, okay? But that hasn't happened yet. It's a process. We're getting there, but it hasn't happened fully yet. Otherwise, like it said everybody would know God. You wouldn't have to teach anybody. Everybody would know him. Has that happened yet? Okay? In verse 6, it calls it a better covenant with better promises. Okay, so a lot of people see that and they're like, well, see, the Torah is yucky, it's not that good. Now we have Jesus and he has a better covenant. But again, it doesn't mean the Torah is bad. Going back to the tourniquet analogy, okay, it's a temporary solution. Okay, but it doesn't fix the root of the problem, which is the problem with our consciousness, right? We all have this, what's the word? Desire, predisposition to sin here and there, because we still have that fleshly error that has to be fixed. The Torah doesn't offer that solution, but God wants to fix that. He wants to correct that, and that's why he sent Yeshua. So now we can read Hebrews 9. If somebody can read Hebrews 9 for me. Not the whole chapter, but just this page, I promise. Okay. Please.
Now the first covenant had regulations for worship and the earthly sanctuary. For a tent was prepared, the first one in which were the lampstand and the table, and the presentation of the loaves, which it called the holy place. And after the second curtain was a tent called the Holy of Holies, containing the golden incense altar, and the ark of the covenant covered all sides with gold, in which were a golden jar containing the manna and the rod of Aaron, and that budded, and the tablet of the covenant, and above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat, about which it is now possible to speak in detail.
That was beautiful. I got emotional at the end. So, like I said, when you read the book of Hebrews, you're expected to know about the Torah, right? When this guy wrote this book, he's like, hopefully somebody knows the Torah when I'm writing this. They better not just be guessing. So we have an issue here, because if anybody knows the tabernacle, what's inside the Holy of Holies? Do you know? The ark, yes, okay. What's inside the holy place? Don't say it.
Oh, sorry.
What's inside the holy place, Ben? Something? Anybody? It's up there. Oh, what? Talking about, yes. You were going to say something?
Oh, yeah, the incense altar.
The altar of incense, right? It's in the holy place. But here it says, in the Holy of Holies, containing the golden altar of incense. Now, clearly, this translator doesn't know the Torah, because in the tabernacle, the altar of incense is not in the Holy of Holies. So there's an issue right here, okay? So when you go to the translation, it says altar of incense, but it could also be talking about a censer, okay? And when you read about it, it says the Day of Atonement censer, okay? Distinguishes a handheld fire pan filled with coals from the altar and incense to create a cloud that covered the mercy seat. This liturgical vessel explains the alternate sense censer, okay? Because when you read the Mishnah, Mishnah is a collection of judiciary, not decrees, decisions that they made with the Sanhedrin about how things are supposed to be done with the Torah. And in Mishnah Yomah, it covers like in detail what the priest is supposed to do, the high priest is supposed to do on Yom Kippur. So it talks about that when he goes into the Holy of Holies, he's supposed to grab the golden coal pan, because they usually use a silver one. On the day of Yom Kippur, they use a gold coal pan. So he goes outside, he gets the coals from the altar, and then he goes and grabs the incense from the altar of incense. He throws it on there, and it creates this cloud of protection, okay? Because he can't just go into the Holy of Holies just like that, blam, here I am, God. He has to use the cloud as protection. Just like when Moses went on Mount Sinai and there was a cloud that covered the top to shield him from God's presence, that's exactly how that cloud is supposed to behave, okay? So we see that this right here is talking about Yom Kippur specifically. But what was the function about Yom Kippur? You know? What? Do you know? Read your notes. Where's your notes? Oh my gosh. Yom Kippur. Remember, it's about cleaning the tabernacle, right? But it deals with a specific type of sin. What sin was that? We talked about it. Rebellious sin. Correct. Thank you. So we're talking about rebellious sin on a specific day in regards to Yeshua. Okay? So keep that in mind. Now we have this one. Could somebody please, with a beautiful voice, read this? Yes, you can read it.
Now these things have been prepared in this way. The priests enter the first tent continually as they accomplish their service, but only the high priest enters into the second tent once a year. Now without blood, which he offers on behalf of himself, and the sins of the people commit in ignorance. The Holy Spirit was making this clear that the way into the holy place was not yet revealed. But while the first tent was still in existence, which was a symbol for the present time, which both the gifts of sacrifice, which were offered, were not able to perfect the worshiper with respect to the conscience. Concerning instead of only food and drink and different washings, regulations of outward things imposed until the time of setting things right.
Okay, so thank you. That was perfect. It says the high priest enters to the second tent once a year. What day is he talking about? Yom Kippur. Yes, correct. Thank you. And this is exactly what we're talking about. It says, in which both the gifts and the sacrifice, the offerings, which were offered, were not able to perfect the worshiper with respect to conscience. So what he's saying is that these offerings that we gave, they don't fix the problem inside. Okay, that's not the point of the offerings. He talks about concerning, instead, only food and drink and different washings, regulations of outward things imposed until the time of setting things right. Okay, so he's saying that all these regulations that we have in regards to the tabernacle and the food laws and stuff like that, it's not about fixing the conscience. It's about maintaining that space. Okay, and when you have impurities, there's going to be two types of impurities. You're going to have ritual impurity. We could write that down. Ritual impurity and moral impurity. Ritual impurity is like I go outside and, well, the analogy that Rico always uses. Okay, I'll use Lucas and Crystal because they're only married people here. Okay, so Lucas, he's jogging, right? He's really sweaty, really breaking a sweat. He comes inside and he wants to give Crystal a hug. What is Crystal going to say?
Yes.
Back off. She's like, you smell like onions. She's going to say back off to go take a shower, and then we can hug. Okay, right? Now, let's say Lucas, he took a shower. He smells fantastic. He has Versace, a cologne on himself. Okay. But he's cheating on Crystal. But he smells good. Can he, I'm sorry. Can he still, she can be okay with the hug? No, right? So those are the differences. Ritual purity is like outside, okay? And moral impurity is your inside, okay? And God really wants you to take care of that inside part. But there's an issue, okay? We have the inclination, that's the word I was looking for, the inclination to sin. And God wants to fix that because if he wants to restore everything and go back to the original plan in the Garden of Eden, that has to be dealt with, okay? And that's where Yeshua comes in. Anybody can read this one, please. Do you want to read it? Thank you.
The Messiah has arrived as a high priest of the good things to come, through the greater and more perfect tent not made by hands, that is, not of this creation, and not by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood. He entered once for all into the most holy place, obtaining eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a young cow, sprinkled on those who are defiled, sanctify them for the ritual purity of the flesh, how much more will the blood of the Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, cleanse your consciousness from dead works to serve the living God.
Perfect. That was fantastic. Okay. For anybody that knows, what is the ashes of a young cow sprinkled on those who are defiled? What is that talking about? Again, this guy was writing to Hebrews. They're supposed to know about the Torah. What are these ashes of a young cow he's talking about?
Ooh,
The red heifer, yes. What is the red heifer ashes for? Purification of what? Not sin.
Ritual and
It says ritual impurity. What type of ritual impurity? Because there's different types of ritual impurity. I didn't mention that. I got you. What? What was that? Death. Okay. So let's say, okay, I buried my dad in the future, way in the future, like 50 years from now. I buried him. According to the Torah, I'm unclean on the outside. So I'm not committing a sin. I'm just clean on the outside because I touched a dead body. Dead bodies are unclean. So I'm supposed to clean myself for a little bit, for like, I think, was it 7 days? But in that cleansing process, I'm supposed to be sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer. And the red heifer is a mystery for the Jews. Okay, they don't really understand it. Why do I need these ashes from a red cow? It has to be perfect. It has to be about 3 years to 4 years old. Am I correct? And it can't have any white hairs. It has to be completely red. They don't understand why there's all these crazy rules. But they know that they need that cow to clean somebody from ritual impurity that deals with death. Okay, and now this person is using that analogy in connection with Messiah, Yeshua. Okay, because what is the issue? What's keeping us away from God? Why can't God just come on earth right now and we just be happy? What's keeping him away? What keeps him away from the tabernacle when things are bad? Somebody said death. Yes, right? Okay, that's why he can't be here, because there's so much sin, which leads to death. And if he were to come right now, we'd all die because of our impurities. Okay, but that death has to be dealt with. Okay. And then right here it says to clean our conscience. Okay, because that's the one thing the Torah cannot do. The Torah teaches you how to have a relationship with God, but it doesn't fix the issue, the main root of the problem. Okay, and that's what God is trying to fix. Now, if somebody could read this, very good, like T.D. Jakes type of voice. So, no.
Who?
T.D. Jakes. You know who T.D. Jakes is? T.D. Jakes. No? Who said that? Well, anyway, forget about that. Somebody read it, please. Yeah.
And because of this, he is the mediator of the new covenant, in order that, because the death has taken place for the redemption of transgression.
Parabasis.
Parabasis.
Yes.
Rebellion committed during the first covenant. Those who are the called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance. For where there is a will, it is a necessity for the death of the one who made the will to be established. For a will is in force concerning those who are dead, since it is never in force when the one who made the will is fled.
So again, we're talking about a specific type of sin. Because a lot of things I see, they'll say, well, Jesus, he died for all our sins, so we don't need the temple anymore. We don't need the tabernacle because he covered all the sins. But like I said, if the Torah already has a solution for certain types of sins, why do we need Jesus then? That's what a Jewish person is going to ask you. We have a lot, what do you call those? The anti-missionaries, okay? They try to disprove that Jesus is not the Messiah. And one of the questions they're always going to ask you is, well, the Torah, it has offerings for sins. It has solutions if you sin to make up with God. Why do I need this Jesus guy? But the one thing that doesn't have a solution is rebellious sin. Yes, it can be forgiven in Yom Kippur, but like I said, somebody's got to pay that price. So if all of humanity is going to be forgiven, which is interesting because Yom Kippur is for communal sins. So now the author of Hebrews is looking at it from a communal point of view. All of humanity as a community has to be forgiven for the rebellion, but somebody has to pay that price if God is going to forgive them, because God can forgive, but that ransom has to be paid. And that's where Yeshua, again, he comes in. And it's interesting that he uses the analogy of the will, because a will is for what? When I write a will, what's the point of the will? What am I putting in that will? Am I putting love notes? Like, here, I loved you guys? Why am I writing this will? It's about stuff, inheritance, right? And he's talking about eternal inheritance. But there's a will, if I wrote a will now and I have my stuff, can they get my stuff now? It only activates after I die. And that's the point that he's trying to make, that the will activates once a person dies. Death brings you that inheritance, and that's the connection that he's trying to make with Yeshua. And then he talks about, therefore, not even the first covenant was ratified without blood, without death. Okay? Something had to die to ratify the covenant. Yeshua had to die to ratify the new covenant. But we're still in that process. It hasn't happened yet. Once he comes, then it starts kicking in. For when every commandment had been spoken by Moses to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of the calves with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the scroll itself and all the people, saying, This is the blood of the covenant that God has commanded for you. And likewise he sprinkled both the tabernacle and all the utensils of the service with the blood. Indeed, nearly everything is purified with blood according to the law. Apart from the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. Okay? Therefore, it was necessary for the sketches of the things in heaven to be purified with these sacrifices, but the heavenly things themselves to be purified with better sacrifices than these. For Messiah did not enter into a sanctuary made by hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, the original one, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. So it's putting him as a high priest, because the high priest, when he goes into the Holy of Holies and he petitions to God, he's representing all of Israel. So now the author of Hebrews is putting Yeshua as a high priest, representing all of humanity. So everybody that accepts Yeshua, he's going to God on your behalf and paying that ransom to say, look, please offer the forgiveness. I came in their name to pay that ransom. Okay? Not in order that he can offer himself many times, as the high priest enters into the sanctuary year by year with blood not his own, since it would have been necessary for him to suffer many times from the foundation of the world. But now he has appeared once at the end of ages for the removal of sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is destined for people to die once after this judgment, thus also Messiah, having been offered once in order to bear the sins of many, will appear for the second time without reference to sin to those who eagerly await him for salvation. Okay, and that was Hebrews chapter 9. But I'm going to summarize everything because I know it's a lot of information and like putting into your brains. So, God's desire is to, since the garden, is to dwell with us. Okay, that's his main desire. Okay, the tabernacle, the temple, was built to fulfill that purpose, that desire. That's the function of the tabernacle. Okay, our sins, however, push God away. Okay, so we maintain that relationship. If we want God in our life, you can even look at that in a spiritual way. If you want God in your heart and your lives, you have to live a certain way. He's not going to just be with you if you're like, oh, you know what, I go to church, and then when I'm not at church, I'm a totally different person. Everybody stumbles and they falls. The Bible says 7 times a righteous person falls and 1 time they get up. Everybody has an issue. But one thing is to have an issue and be like, well, I'm going to try to fix myself. Another thing is to be like, well, this is who I am. Accept it. Okay, that's a big difference. So you got to at least try to be a better person. You know. Oh, that's not working. The Torah teaches how to be set apart to maintain God's presence amongst us. That's the function of the Torah. It's to teach you how to have a good relationship with God. It's not about giving you salvation. It's about giving you an easy life. Okay, if you want to have a happy life with God, that's the point of the Torah. Okay, that's why we keep the commandments. But God still wants to return to his original plan. He kind of likes what he has now, but he would like something better, okay? He wants to go back to that plan in the Garden of Eden. Yeshua is the ransom for humanity's rebellious sins. We receive God's gift of eternal life through the payment of Yeshua's death, okay? For now, we follow the Torah, not for salvation, but to maintain our relationship with God. And that would summarize everything that I just said in a nice little bow, okay? That's it. Now, these are my resources, okay? And of course, I always use Rico, okay? And I'm not finished. We still have to cover Matthew 22. Do we have time? I don't know. I think we have time. But he actually did a video this week. I wanted to talk about Hebrews 9 and Exodus 24. I was like, where do I go? Where do I start? And then he put this video this week, and I was like, thank you, okay? But it's a pretty good video. I would watch it. And he has a series on his website where he goes through each chapter of the book of Hebrews. It's pretty good. Okay? So with that said, I have Matthew 22. Now, I don't have a crazy teaching with Matthew 22, but I would like to read it. But I want to do something a little bit different. So I thought it'd be fun if we, not act it out, but if everybody had a different role in reading it, that way it would be better to read it. Okay? So for my chapter, my Jesus, my Yeshua, it's going to be Lucas. Lucas, if you could please read the red letters, okay?
Red letters?
Yes, okay? Don't worry, there's some blue in there. I need somebody to play my king, okay? My king in the parable. Who would love to do this, okay? This is the acting role of a lifetime. The shaking kid that says no. You want to be the king?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, so you're the king. Okay, you have this idea. No. You're the righteous king. Okay, so you have this benevolence. Okay, so you gotta kind of puff up your chest and feel like And Lucas, you're the savior for mankind. Keep that in mind. But you're also humble. So speaking of humble tone. Okay. And I will be the narrator. So I read the black letters. Isn't that fun?
Does anyone else want to be?
What? Oh, there's more roles because there's a whole chapter. We're gonna read this together. Okay.
Is it just for this part right here, or am I reading all of it?
You're my Yeshua for this chapter. So if you would like to sit in the front, so that way they can hear you in the microphone.
I can see this one.
They can hear you. They can hear you, my muse. Come on. Okay. So starting off verse 1, it says, and continuing, Yeshua spoke to them again in parables, saying,
The kingdom of God may be compared to a man, a king, who gave a wedding celebration for his son. And he sent his slaves to summon those who had been invited to the wedding celebration, and they did not want to come. And again, he sent other slaves, saying,
Tell those who have been invited, behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding celebration.
But they paid no attention and went away, this one to his own field, that one to his business, and the other, seizing his slaves, mistreated them and killed them. And the king was angry, and sent his troops and destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. Then he said to his slaves,
The wedding celebration is ready, but those who have been invited were not worthy. Therefore, go out to the places where the roads exit the city, and invite to the wedding celebration as many people as you find.
And those slaves went out into the roads and gathered everyone whom they found, both evil and good. And the wedding celebration was filled with dinner guests. But when the king came in to see the dinner guests, he saw a man there not dressed in wedding clothes. He said to him,
Friend, how did you come in here not having wedding clothes?
but he could say nothing. Then the king said to the servants,
Tie him up, hand and foot, and throw him into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
For many are called, but few are chosen.
Yeah, that was pretty good. All right. So now for this next role, okay, we have the Pharisees and the Herodians. Somebody.
Wait, are we going to go through what that parable is saying?
Oh well, that's true too. So he's basically talking about how the Israelites, they rejected the prophets. Okay, God sent prophets for them to turn around. They killed them and rejected him. Okay, so now God is like, you know what? I'm gonna send it to everybody. Okay, sinner, non-sinner, everybody's invited to this banquet. But like it says, many are called, few are chosen. That's why the name of the show is called Chosen. By the way. They should have ended it like that and like just have Yeshua like look into the camera, some shades. But that's the point of the parable. Everybody's invited, but not everybody's going to be part of the kingdom. It depends on how you behave. Okay, this guy came in shorts and Crocs to the wedding, and he was kicked out into the darkness, which represents hell, death. Okay, Sheol. So you have to know exactly what the king is expecting. If you know where in the Bible does it teach you what the king is expecting, you guys at least know that. We talk about it every week. He's giving you the answer. Torah, yes. Okay, so that teaches you exactly what the king is expecting, and that is the analogy that the person is using. Okay, this person should at least know what the king is expecting by studying in the Word, but he didn't, and he should have been shorts, Crocs, and kiss the cook apron. I don't know, but that was the parable. Very nice, very beautiful. Okay, thank you for reading that. Like I said, I need a Pharisee/Herodian. Somebody who's okay. You got to be kind of smug, okay, and kind of pompous. And they were pro Romans, okay. They were pro Roman government, so they're kind of butt kissers, okay. They're snotty. They had that attitude, like nah. Okay, somebody read that. Would you like to read that, sir? Yeah, I'm talking to you, Andrew. Yes, I'm pointing directly at you. Would you mind reading that? Okay. I'm still the narrator, and this guy is still Yeshua. Okay, so it says, then the Pharisees went and consulted so that they could entrap him with a statement. And they sent the disciples to him with the Herodians, saying,
Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth. You do not care what anyone thinks, because you do not regard the opinion of people. Therefore, tell us what you think. Is it permitted to pay taxes to Caesar or not?
but because he knew their maliciousness, Yeshua said,
How do you know where to stop?
I don't know.
the green? Oh, I forgot you're colorblind.
He's colorblind. That's why I asked him earlier. Yeah, it's green.
To me, it's green.
It's a dark green.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
Well,
it's a forest green.
Some of you guys found out you're colorblind today. I'm sorry. Well,
Hypocrite! Why are you testing me? Show me the coin for the tax. So they brought him a denarius.
oh, I was supposed to read that. I put that in. And he said to them,
Wait.
whose image? You read that.
Oh, and he said to them, whose image and inscription is this?
They said to him,
Caesar.
then he said to them,
Therefore, give to Caesar the things of Caesar, and to God the things of God.
and when they heard this, they were astonished, and they left him and went away. Their minds were blown. They're like, dang it, he's too smart. He's just so smart. So
Yeah, it's forest green.
it's green. I can see the difference.
I can see the
I
difference.
can see it and I can't.
Oh, wow.
Just because like we're so focused.
Papa? No. Just keep it.
It is.
Okay, so now in this probably, can you see that orange?
Orange.
Okay.
Air.
There's black, orange, red.
Whatever's not red.
It's all red.
No, it's not.
It's all red.
Okay.
I can see it. I can see it.
I believe
This chunk, okay? So
Air.
you gotta play it, you gotta, shh.
Don't tell me this. Oh,
Don't focus on the color, focus on the word.
4 to 27.
I'm not crazy.
Okay,
Barely see it.
okay. Yes. The colors are close. Yes, thank you. I need somebody to play the Sadducees. They didn't believe in the prophets. They only believed in the Torah. They didn't believe in resurrection. Okay, they're very smug. They're very materialistic. I want you to embody that behavior. Okay, can you be a Sadducee? Okay, and you're still my Yeshua. Okay. On that day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came up to him and asked him, saying,
Teacher.
That's orange.
"You're not even paying attention. I even said the Sadducees." You read verse 29.
Don't forget that he's colored.
Dude,
I feel so bad.
I thought he would at least get the red.
You couldn't make it like.
It's similar.
There's only so many colors I could use. Okay. Read. Shh.
Start all over.
Okay. On that day, the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him, saying,
Teacher, Moses said if someone dies without having children, his brother is to marry his wife and father, descendants of his brother. Now there are 7 brothers with us, and the first died after getting married, and because he didn't have any descendants, he left his wife to his brother. So also the second and third up to the 7th, the last of all the women died. All the women died. Okay. What?
The last of all
the
women
women.
died.
The last of all the women died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all have her as a
Those are the questions they're asking.
yes, because they're Sadducees. Because they don't believe in resurrection. So they're trying to get you like a tricky question. But Yeshua, being Yeshua, answered and said to them in a very humble tone,
You are mistaken, because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. For in the resurrection, I didn't realize it was that savage. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven. Now concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, who said, I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? He is not the God of the dead, but of the living.
and when the crowds heard this, they were amazed at his teaching. Now, I always overlooked this part. Like, I didn't really understand what he was saying. But every time he refers to the Israelites, he always says, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He doesn't say like in the past tense, like I still am. And that's the point that he's trying to make. He's not the God of the dead, but he's the God of the living. So the Sadducees were like, woo, because he's using the Torah that they only read. They don't read the prophets.
Shoot, man, you know what? You're right. That's a good point.
He got them. He went like, psh. That's what they said too. They're like, shoot, man, you got a good point. I'm not a Sadducee anymore. Okay.
It's all red, right?
No, I went back. No,
Oh,
what happened there?
Yes, that is all red. That has to be.
Well, you can't see that's green. I'll, you know.
I know.
What?
Okay.
Everyone needs accents here.
That cannot be green.
These lighter colors are very different from the one color that you
I think some people are colorblind. Okay. Crystal, you can see the green, so you'll read that one line. Okay.
They said to him, David. It's literally
Now, while the Pharisees, they were pretty, how would I say it? Haughty. They're haughty, arrogant. Okay, they thought people that didn't study the Torah were dummies, which is basically everybody else. The regular people didn't really have time to study or the money to study, so they treated everybody like trash, and they thought they were the best, the cream of the crop. But they were hypocrites at the same time, because while they were praying out loud to everybody and looking holy, they were not really doing what the Torah commanded them to do. Okay, they were divorcing their wives because their cooking was bad. They were not helping their mother and their father. They were giving excuses like, well, I have to help the temple, so I can't really help you, mom and dad. I'm sorry. So they were finding excuses to not do things that they're supposed to do. Okay, so that's a Pharisee. Keep that in mind for your one line. Okay, keep that. It says, now, while the Pharisees were assembled, Yeshua asked them, saying,
what do you think about the Messiah? Whose son is he?
they said to him, he said to them, I mean, it's clearly not red, at least, right?
Yeah, but I don't.
How?
Okay, how then does David, by the Spirit, call him Lord, saying, Adonai said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet. If then David calls him Lord, how is he his son?
Ooh. And no one was able to answer him a word, nor did anyone dare from that day on to ask him any more questions. They're like, we're not worthy. And that is chapter 22.
I still don't see it.
Shabbat shalom. Goodbye.